Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be doing a quick top-down analysis on Bitcoin and see what kind of optimal entries that can be provided to us using the Elliott Wave Theory for both the bullish and bearish scenarios. Starting off with the daily chart, I'm still convinced that we have a bottom secured with the primary wave 4 in the yellow circle completed, looking to finally complete its fifth wave to the upside around the 100k levels. There are a few reasons. First is that we have more or less hit the 38.2% Fibonacci level, which is a very common reversal level on the macro for a wave 4, which is measured from our wave 2 pivot and termination point of wave 3. Similarly, since we are in a corrective move for a wave 4, what you typically want to be doing is looking for equality between the actionary waves of W's and Y's and A's and C's, depending on how you're seeing the structure being created, and which is going to be putting us in between the 100% level and the 161.8% level using the Fibonacci extension tool, meaning that we have achieved equality for this corrective pattern, which also meets us right into that zone where that 38.2% Fibonacci level is of that normal Fibonacci retracement. The fact that we bounced 30% off of that level shows us that bulls may still be interested in pushing the price towards higher levels when we are looking on the macro structure as we have here. Bulls will need to make sure to secure the protected low for good, because anything lower than that might provide us with possibly a different route that leads us to lower levels where we may be working for a bearish scenario and not a wave 4 for the bullish continuation. So we most definitely need to secure this green box. Other than that, we also have more or less met every guidelines in terms of alternation as well, meaning that if our wave 2 is sideways as we have here as a possible flat, our wave 4 is going to be considered or assumed sharp in terms of the pattern in itself, which we also have because we have a completed double zigzag pattern or a normal zigzag, depending on your structural labeling. So far, because of this textbook setup with everything in combination in regards to the rules and guidelines, there is a much higher probability for the price to continue higher. In terms of the bearish option, there is another bearish option that may be working in a possible flat, which is very low in probability at this current time of recording. This means that we now have to label this whole 2024 range as a beginning of an impulse to the downside, as we're trying to complete a larger primary wave C to the downside as a 5-wave move in itself of that C wave. If that's the case, this wave 1 is still being created, or wave 2 rather, as a possible larger flat. Now this possible flat, since we did preach the previous high, that means that we're working in a possible expanded flat where we created a new price extreme for wave B, and we're now going to be looking for a possible running flat which ends anywhere around these regions, but that's extremely rare in itself, especially on the macro. I have never seen Bitcoin do that, nor have we seen any stock or commodity do that on the macro. We usually see those typically on the shorter time frames where reversal happens very swiftly. But in this case, we're going to be looking for the more common expanded flat target, which is going to be right below that possible pivot of wave 2. Or pivot of wave A rather, and that's going to be around the $15,000 to all the way down to $10,000, depending on how this C wave extends to the downside. So with that being said, we're looking for a 3-3-5 structure, and we're now finally possibly working in that beginning of that 5-wave move to the downside for that wave C. Now, since we're looking for that wave 1, now since we are still in the beginning wave structure for this wave 1 actionary wave, it's very low in probability, and the only way I can be counting this is a possible leading expanding diagonal, which is rare in itself, which is these corrective overlaps, meaning that we are looking for a 1-2 to be completed, where this move up here was corrective move, corrective move, corrective move, and that move in itself will be that wave 2, and we'll be looking for that wave 3 extension to the downside in the intermediate degree. We can alternatively label this as a possible 1-2 instead of that AB that we originally had, and if we label this as a 1-2, this is going to be happening much faster and quicker to the downside than we're going to be originally anticipating. So if that's the case, this idea is kind of the idea that's still on my radar, and we're going to be monitoring the situation going forward, especially if we break this possible low over here. So if we zoom into the shorter time frames, if we pull up the 4-hour chart, again, this is now just a zoomed in perspective. Now, where we originally saw this idea as a WXY or an ABC, we don't really need to be discussing that. We really want to be discussing how we're going to be continuing that wave 5 to the upside on the macro. The only way I can be counting this possible structure for a wave 1 to the upside is going to be a possible leading diagonal of a contracting variation, meaning that we're looking for this as a 3-wave move, 3-wave move, 3, 3, 3 respectively, where we're eventually going to be creating that contracting nature, eventually creating that primary wave 1, and we're going to be looking for a pullback as a wave 2, and that will be our wave 1, 2 of a larger, higher degree 5th wave, and then we're going to be looking for a 3, 4, 5 respectively. So if that's the case, since the move off of the lows does look like it's a possible 3-wave move, the only mode of pattern that I can be creating out of this is a possible leaning diagonal that's going to be eventually created. And we'll have to still monitor how this is going to be playing out, but it is working out correctively at this current time of recording, which means that we do have still a good possibility that we're going to be creating this remaining 3 subwaves as a possible contracting nature, and we're going to be creating that primary wave 1. So if that's the case, what other possibility of a bullish continuation can we have? I think people are prematurely saying that this is invalid, but it is still possible, which is a 1-2-1-2 idea, meaning that we're going to be looking for an impulsive structure to the upside. If in the case Bitcoin does just continue out of here with no real reason and it just continues bullishly to the upside, breaking all these previous highs, we can be working in that 1-2-1-2 idea, which is extremely bullish, and we may be seeing higher levels much sooner than this originally anticipated 1-2 pullback as a leading diagonal. But that is kind of lower in probability, but it doesn't deem it invalid, and we still have to monitor that idea because we haven't broken that previous low of that second degree 1-2. If that's the case, remember, if this lower degree 1-2 is larger in time and size of this parent degree 1-2, it does reduce the probabilities, but it doesn't invalidate it. So this idea is still being monitored, as you can see by this current green line, if we do impulse out of these regions. So that is the current bullish scenarios. Now, what about the bearish scenarios? I did discuss that we could be still working in our wave 4, meaning that we're going to be working as a possible C wave to the downside where we don't have a completed wave Y. This move here is incomplete as a possible A, B, C to the downside because our wave Ys are constructed as 3-wave moves. Remember, we're looking for simple zigzags for waves W and Y. We're now looking for that final possible move to the downside where we see wave C as the diagonal in itself. Again, similarly, just like we have for that leading diagonal, we don't have enough information for how this diagonal to the downside is going to be created. We just simply do not have enough information. So for the time being, I don't know if this is going to be in play. We'll have to see. But for the time being, since we haven't reached any lows or major immediate lows as well, with the current time of recording, I don't think that this is going to be a possibility for the time being with the current data given. So I do believe we're going to be hitting higher levels, and we can be easily swapping, within the next day or so if it does move down. However, for the time being, since we are trying to create these analysis on the daily, we're trying to find a possible wave 1 being created either as a leading diagonal or we're doing a continuation to the upside as a bullish continuation of a 1-2-1-2. Now, those ideas right now are all possibly kind of in a 50-50 similarity on the shorter time frames. But again, on the larger time frame, like I said, this is a top-down analysis that we're looking for a wave 5 continuation to the upside. Since our probability is much higher for the upside on the macro, we're still looking for higher levels, even if we do come down for a possible C wave. So this right now, we're seeing two possibilities of two directional routes to the upside for that primary 5th wave to eventually complete. So I am ultimately bullish for the current time. If that's the case and we do break down to this low here with a very impulsive structure, then we're going to have to swap bearish. But right now, with that current data given, I don't think that's a current possibility. So hopefully that was helpful, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you guys in the next video with a new update. Thank you very much. If you haven't already, please do follow me on social media on X at XForceGlobal. If you haven't already, also please inquire about the XForce Discord membership. The link is in the description below. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.